Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, greetings.
Good evening.
Good to be with all of you. Thank you so much for sticking with me this week.
Were you just getting back from Kansas?
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
I got
okay.
back 30 minutes ago.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, straight on the plane. Got some of my favorite Thai food from the place down the street. Ate it faster than I ever have before. And here with you, gentlemen. It's good to be with you guys. Thank you so much for allowing the time change or just rolling with it. So, Max, you have to go, right? At a certain time? Welcome into.
Yeah, 10:30.
Is that 1 hour from now for you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Eastern time.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, then with that in mind, let's get started. Okay. Londell sent me a message saying that he got the flu this weekend. So he is out. And John Bellett asked if he could join tonight and then also got sick. I had said that it was okay for him to join, but then he's not here. But I wanted to mention that to you guys because this is the fundamentals. Normally, I wouldn't just let a man join our groups, but John's been a steward and I figured we're creating new norms here with trainings, right, to involve men. So let's give ourselves the opportunity to just arrive here in the space. And while we do that, I'm going to grab my headphones. Give yourself the opportunity to arrive. And I'm going to, can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. So today is our third night together in our fundamentals. And the theme is assertive vulnerability, going deep and using the space. I'm going to do a stretch too. Tim, that look good. And tonight is the first, what's special about bringing a group of men together that we've noticed over iterations within our community is that the third group is the first time that we are able to actually consciously use the space, right? Where we are able to practice assertive vulnerability. We're able to make a conscious choice. We have an idea of what to expect. We came in on the first week, right? The first night together. And for many men, that's just our first time ever being in a space like this together, right? And it's very important to give our bodies and our nervous system the opportunity to just be in the space and to move through the whole arc of the group, right? And the whole point of that first group is simply to appreciate what connection is on and in the body, not as a thought in our head, but as a direct physical experience with a group of other men, right? Because sometimes we think we're going to know what it's going to be like to be in there, but we just don't know until we have an actual direct physical experience of it. And that first night, our protective parts begin to trust us because we survive the experience, right? We actually have to survive the experience. And in a lot of, tonight, I just want to bring it in here. I'm coming off of a flight from being in Kansas for 5 days and being around a group of men in a wedding in Kansas. And now I'm here in a men's group with you gentlemen. And we are cutting through a physical, visceral, culture of manhood. that for many men sends messages to our nervous system of physical threat to our safety, to our life, to be able to even be in a space with a group of other men. And so we need to go through that first night. But here we have that power of connection, the power of being present, and then how to check in. We learn how to check in together. We just do it. The second time we come in, we use the same physical structure. We move through the same 7 stages, but this time we bring in the main cultural friction that we have to cut through as men, as human beings who identify as male, who have been socialized as male, and that is the man box. And we use the very thing that gets in our way to create a sense of belonging. We actually bring it up from the darkness, from our shadow, and bring it out into the space, and we all relate to it in our own way. And we find out that even though this man across from me looks different than me, or even though this man, I judge him to be someone I could be friends with, and this man doesn't seem that way, we all have a relationship with this, right? And then we get to remake it. We don't deny it and run away from it, like so many of us have felt like we had to do, right? I can't even identify with the culture of manhood. I have to be something totally different, right? And we don't throw out all of the constructive parts of the man box. We actually have to remake it together. We have to do that work, right? And it's just the beginning, right? That first night. And now tonight is assertive vulnerability, using the space and going deep. And so there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 main themes we review in this week every time. And so the main thing I want to start off with is the difference between normal vulnerability, day-to-day vulnerability, and assertive vulnerability. Okay. And this has to do with the second part, which is the role of structure. Assertive vulnerability is making a conscious choice to be vulnerable while taking responsibility for your parts, for your experience. Okay. And this can be very challenging to do in relationship, because when we become vulnerable, when we make the choice to open, there's been so many constructive reasons in relationship to suppress some things, actively suppress some things. And when those parts come up and out, they can bring out younger parts of ourselves, which actually ask our partners or our friends to take care of those parts for us. And that's when we feel needy. That's when we might feel sheepish. Right? We might even play out these scripts with men in the group. And the reason why I want to call that out is because of one of the main things we're going to talk about in here tonight, which is to notice on and in your body when your nervous system tightens, when your body closes in relationship with what a man shares in the space. Because we can feel when another man is letting go of swimming for himself. He's saying, hey, I need you to help me stay afloat, right? And our job in here is to be with a man, right? It's not to hold him up all the time. We might do that, right? But there's a big difference between caring for a man and caretaking. And what we do is we feel it. We're not here to judge it, but we feel it on our body. And the way we share that is we can say, hey, Mike, when you said that, I felt tight. And I noticed the story in my head was this. And that's how we can share with the structure, we can share a man what is our experience and our story in our head, and allow that man to witness what we're feeling in relationship to him, and let him find his own path to his own wisdom and healing. He can feel for himself rather than this being advice given, right? Because maybe he's triggering a needy part in me, right? And when I felt tight, it's my own shrinking away, and maybe I need to lean into that. So it's all just about sharing relationship, okay? You guys following along with this? Seems so, by your body language. So the role of the structure in assertive vulnerability, okay? How many of you in relationship have had arguments or repair processes with your partners or your friends where you didn't know how to just leave it afterwards? Like that kind of just goes on, and you get to this place where you just don't really know how to walk away first and to be okay. No? No? Okay. It might only be me, right? I don't think it is. Okay. So the role of the structure in assertive vulnerability, when we create the structure and we have a time limit on a man, time is a beautiful forcing function, right? And it helps us to create, when I say, my name is Chris and I am checking in, it creates the opportunity for me for another man to say, I've got you, right? And then he's speaking to a part of me, to my frontal cortex, and helping me to let go and to go back into my body. And this is actually neurologically happening. It is very, very different to go into a cave, right? Or to go out of our day-to-day, our default life experience, and to not have somebody waiting for you. But when you know that somebody has you, you can come into your body. Those parts can trust that some other human being, some other nervous system has us. And that is what we're doing in here. I say, I've got you. Because in a way, I'm talking to that man's protective parts and building trust over time that he can go down in to places maybe he hasn't been. Now, when we end the share and we close it, and I say, my name is Chris and I'm checking in a second time, it allows for that finality to lead, for me to feel what I am feeling, and for that to be my experience. And then for all of you to have your experience. And then I get to learn through you, and you get to learn through me. We all get to share in what our relationship is with what was brought into the space. And that is beyond words. It is in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, he says it's so natural, it's supernatural. Right? Because we all have emotional experiences that remind us of stories in our head or past experiences. And when one man brings it into the space, he in a way opens that up in all of us. Right? So we get to learn by witnessing a man move through that. And that structure is very important, especially to hold emotions that have previously separated us, and we didn't get to during ruptures, we didn't get to come back together. Or it sends a message in our body to a story in our head that says, I am threatened, this is bad, right? And then that part forever lives in that until we get to repair. And for many men in these spaces who have been through repair processes in this community, when we say having a brave space, what's actually most important is that we come back to the container to tend and mend. to move through the 3-part repair process, to realize that we actually can do that. Okay. The third piece is the problems in our life are our curriculum, and we each have our own. And this comes from one of the fundamentals of spiritual psychology. But outside of this space, problems are problems. They're things that we move away from. They send a message to our nervous system. Something important has happened to the body's well-being, and we move away from it in order to protect ourselves. And that is constructive in many ways, but it's also destructive in the sense that we don't know always how to come back to that. And so when you come into this space and you check in, or a man checks in, he is scanning the experience of his life and choosing something to bring in. And in this place, we're actually slowing things down and coming back to these things that are usually challenges or problems, but that's not all that this space is for. Right? So it becomes a very special opportunity to witness another man moving through something that's happened in his life, and that we can see our own life experience through witnessing his own. And so that brings me to the scanning your perceptual database. That is, I showed this in community coaching last week, and I'll send you guys a chart of it, but it's the emotional episode timeline. Have you guys all seen that? So the emotional episode timeline is you guys see that? So this is was created for the Atlas of Emotions, which was a study done by Dr. Eve Ekman with the Dalai Lama on what do emotions researchers agree on. And it starts on the left with the precondition. And this entire experience happens in 3 to 30 seconds. Physiologically, it's like 30 seconds, but it's really under 3 seconds that this whole thing happens. And so there's always a precondition that we're in. And then there's a trigger, and there's an event that causes the trigger to occur. And then we have our own perceptual database. We have the imagery, the visualizations, the story in our head that's related to anything that has felt like that in the past, felt physically. And then we have the state changes on or in the body. Physical changes occur and psychological changes occur at the same time. And these physical changes on and in the body trigger a psychological change in the head. So the story follows the state of the body. And then immediately, almost immediately, we have a choice of a constructive or a destructive reaction. And usually we get caught in destructive reactions that re-trigger the event, because those episodes, those actions in the past have helped us survive to get to where we are today. But they also increase and reignite the emotional episode, which is why if you've ever felt like, oh, I get caught in this like anxiety for a long period of time, the initial trigger might have been very interstitial, might have been right away. So if you know how to relearn a constructive action, we can actually come back to a state of tend of men on our own. And we actually have to become conscious of that. And so then we have the post condition. We're basically moving through this entire emotional episode timeline when anything comes into the body and creates tension, until we actually learn that it's safe to open, and not only safe, but requires less energy, and that we actually become energized. And that's what the healing process is, right? Becoming a regulating source for yourself and a co-regulating source for people that are around you. Right? And that's what we're doing in this space as men. We're learning how to become a regulating source for ourselves. And then the men in this space are also acting as co-regulating sources for us. And we are assisting in that together, which is one of the reasons why you show up into this space and you leave feeling energized. It's very different than if I just gave you a didactic cognitive lesson on it, right? Does anybody have any questions about this right now? We can talk about it later in community fiction. But then you look into it.
I just had a general question. You this was like the third or fourth point that you're going over right now, and you mentioned like the two before about like structure. How are you kind of like what's the umbrella over all of these points? Like what is this, all these points leading towards, or what's the general category?
What's happening when we're using the space,
Okay.
right? When we're practicing assertive vulnerability, when we're learning to use the space and to go deep. So we're creating a space to be able to trigger this chart, right? In front of another man, in front of a group of men, right? If I scan my perceptual database when I'm checking in, and I choose to check in on something related to the wedding this weekend, I'm actually bringing a story into the space and then finding context. And Ben, if you ask me in the middle of that, hey, Chris, what are you feeling? Come into your body. I can actually conjure, and that's why we call it conjuring, because we're actually conjuring the physical state to happen again. But this time in a space that's brave, right? Where maybe I didn't have to shut myself down like I thought I had to do in public. Does that make sense? Cool. Let's get out of here. And so using the space, we have three primary roles in the group. We have a fourth, which is the host or facilitator. But the roles that we all play in the group are we can witness, we can choose to open, and we can help guide and run deeper. So when by simply being in the space, we are holding the role of witnessing. And if we notice our attention go off into what's happening in the other room, or get pulled up into our head, this is why I offer you to come back into your body by to honor what that man is bringing to the space. And while we're witnessing that man, we are taking in his state, what he's saying, what he's not saying, how his body looks, right? His tonality and his voice. But we're also able to ask ourselves the same thing. What am I feeling? What do I feel in my body? What do I need? And then if we sync up with that man, if we feel deeply connected with him, we might be the man to guide him. To practice actually guiding a man deeper into his experience. When we do that, there's always a curve to it. We're not going to go deeper into that, the stage of that curve tonight. This is fundamentals. But as we learn to do that, we'll always energetically feel what it's like to move through that arc with a man and to get to some conclusion or some space where we feel inspired. We feel like we could craft a stretch or a work state, some conclusion. And these are the conclusions that are usually hard to, or we haven't been able to reach outside of the space when things are moving quickly. And so the final piece here is that we are here to be with them. We are here to be with each other as we are. We are not here to make a man feel better. We're not here to help a man be more successful in his life. We're not here to specifically to heal. We're not here for any other reason but to learn to slow down and to be with a man as he is. And that intention, that core intention, is what allows all of those other things to occur. Right? I may, for my own choice, I may come in and want to use the space to be held accountable. And I can do that. Ben, you can come in here with your own intention for the space. But as a group, we're here to learn to be with each other as we are, right? And to learn to be in the creativity of what that space is with the men in the space. Okay. There's a lot. I'm going to stop the recording here. Does anyone have any questions before I stop the recording and we have a group without recording? Because tonight I'd like to be able to just check in and to use the space as a group. The theme tonight is our third group. It's assertive vulnerability, going deep and using the space. Yeah.
I guess it's not so much a question as it is a comment. And maybe this will be something that we get into when we're in the space. But I notice myself having difficulty in being able to figure out when I should verbalize, like if like a man says something that like causes something like a reaction in me. In finding that or like figuring like, when is it appropriate to bring that into the space versus B, just like, oh, okay, I'm noticing I'm having an experience. Can I just have that for myself and then just continue to just witness this man? So I noticed myself struggling in those instances of like, I'm kind of triggered by what this man said. But then if he's like still sharing, I'm like, I don't know when to, do I wait until the end? Do I say it in the moment? And then,
Yeah. Who feels connected to this question? It's such, I feel connected to that, Ben, and I light up. I just noticed when you were asking it. Can we spend a few minutes on it?
sure.
Mike, maybe Brian, maybe you two want to join in on this. Max, if you want to too. Tim, are you still here? Did you have to just turn off your screen?
I am. Sorry, I had to get some water. I realized it in my water. I'm like, man, I'm really thirsty.
It's okay. So Ben, what I heard you say was like, when should I interrupt? Like when I'm feeling, right? And even the word interrupt, right, has a lot of connotations to it, right?
Yeah.
What feels right to you? How do you answer that question?
What feels good for me is, unless if it is a reaction that feels like, it's at the expense, like if I feel like someone else is like being attacked, or like I need to like, kind of step into like, okay, there's like an intensity going on for me, and it could be impacting others as well. Then I would probably feel more called to stepping in to interrupt. But if it is an instance of just like, it's a more personal, like just something this man said that like I'm not agreeing with, or just noticing my own inner kind of chatter and dialogue while he's sharing, I can see myself like, okay, just like, great, notice that, acknowledge it, and can you just continue to just kind of be with him and share it at the end if it still feels like it feels pertinent to be shared.
I notice when you share that you are having an experience and that there's a potential for you to be aware of like an agreement or a disagreement in your head, even in the thought of you not bringing that into the space, it's like there's a craving to be a part of that experience for me on in my body, that if a man was in this space with me and you were feeling something, honoring your body that you were aware of in relationship to what that man brought into the space. And you felt that it wasn't purposeful or worthy, or I don't know what the judgment or the reason there is, right? That is like there's like a sadness for me of like, oh, right? And that's your choice. Brian, what do you?
I've been doing this for a while, and I had not really reflected upon the process that I go through, as per described by Benjamin. And my observation of myself is that no matter how long I've been at group work in men's groups, I still, at the very last second, even after believing that I have something to give, it's like going skydiving. And I remember going skydiving when you let go of the plane. It's just like, let go. And it's like, this is my best shot. I could, I think I'm within the norms of the group. I think, this is something good to contribute. I, hope that I'm not going to piss somebody off. I hope I'm not going to offend somebody. But all of a sudden, I just like say, okay, this is it. I go. I'm going, and I'm going to say what I have to say.
Brian and Ben and anyone else interested in this, I do notice that there is a big difference, though. There is a skill to sharing, Ben, when you talked about your experience, to sharing with another man what was happening in my body in relationship to what he was saying, and giving the learning to articulate some context of what I visualized was there for me clearly and directly, without giving advice or telling him what to do or saying what I think that man should do. It's me sharing my experience, right? Versus providing color to what I thought about what he's doing, right? Which is like, when you did that, yeah, go, right? Which happens at times in the group, but that's a totally different thing than practicing. Hey, when you said that, I noticed just now, I felt tight, and I just had this memory of being with my mother, right? For this part, I want this part to come out, to do better at being with her and not shutting that part down, right? And then it's boom, back into the man's space, because you're giving him pieces of information to plant as seeds in his own system.
Benjamin, one thing that I find myself striving to connect and communicate is when I see another man on the verge of a feeling and an experience that I've been in, that I didn't understand, that I had to learn to understand. And it's usually what ends up happening with me is that triggers something in me that I feel. And my way to react to that is to say, hey, when you said this, I felt this because I've been there and I understand how that feels. So it connects with me, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes just by allowing somebody to see that I've been where they are allows them to experience it in a different way, because Chris says we're all here, we're together. And just by understanding that somebody else has that, right? You don't have to necessarily, like Chris said, like correct or guide or do whatever, but expressing that I have been exactly where you are, and I understand it from my perspective what happened to me when I was going through that, and how that makes me feel now as a different person than who I was when I experienced that. Doesn't necessarily mean that I have to give you advice, on getting to that next step. It just means that I want you to know that I understand from my perspective what you're going through.
What
And that,
there's
yeah.
Tim,
go ahead, Chris.
beautiful, Tim. And there's a key line from constructive to destructive for me in this is to remind that when you're in that if you're feeling connected to a man, even you with non-verbally opening and being with it, right? And working through your own experience to stay open in that man's presence can be a signal that you're showing this man that what you're experiencing is not bad, right? Like what I am courageous, right? Like Tim, and I've seen you, I feel like I have seen you do this when it seems like you get attuned to what's happening in the space, and then you simply don't even lean back, right? You get more connected and you bring that up on and in your body. The one line is anytime we hear in a man in here say, and I didn't hear you say this exactly, but you're inspiring it for me, is like, I know what you're feeling, right? Like we don't know what a man is feeling, but we feel connected to it. And
Right.
Tim, I think you did a good job of treading that line of being like, I'm feeling so deeply connected to what you're bringing into the space. And it's reminding me of this experience for me.
Right.
Right. And it's okay. Feel it. Right. Like,
Right.
I can feel it. You can feel it.
And I think the one thing that I've always appreciated about these spaces is that I learned so much about just allowing. It's very, very connecting. It's very interesting to allow two people to be and exist in the same concept of what they're feeling and not necessarily need to feel the same thing. Right? Even
I
though
don't
we
know.
both,
What do you mean?
I mean that like that's like with Benjamin, like you said, like something calls you to connect with somebody, right? And if you want to connect with them, great. If you don't feel the need to, great. And that might change from day to day, from minute to minute, from beginning to end of the session, of the space, depending on what goes on with you. But I've always really tried to make sure that I'm not expecting somebody to feel the way that I feel. But I am going to let that person know that I have been where they've been and I have felt something, and that something is now coming back up for me because of what they are going through or what they've shared.
When you say I've been where you've been, I feel tight. And the story in my head is that you don't know if you've been where I've been, but you might feel connected to where I've been. It's when we make that jump, that's where we go from empathy to sympathy. Right. And it's in our language. It's flowing. And this is dynamic, guys. This is why we have structure, right? To clear it, right? To be able to check in and then and try again, right? This is not a space. Anytime you're feeling tension on or in your body, it's a signal to come back into your body and to ask yourself, what am I feeling? Where do I feel in my body? And what do I need? What can I, right? Because there is a deeply core piece to this, that this is creative and dynamic, right? It's not about me being in charge, right? Like this isn't Chris Wilson's men's group. This is our group. And I'm showing up as me, and Ben, you're showing up as you, and Tim, you're showing up as you. And if I say something in here, Tim, that makes you feel tight, and then, right, it becomes the opportunity to work on that. Right. Great question, Ben. It does bring up something for me though, of like, and then maybe we'll end here, which is like the difference between a community group, and a group of 6 or 8 men where it's a closed group, or one of our advanced practice groups where it's like 12 guys and we have a few coming in and out, but we're together for like 3 months. I do just want to point out that like each one has its pros and cons, right? They're changing, right? They have their limitations, right? And I think as I've seen the community become a thing, there's so many benefits to being able to come to a check-in group for an hour together. But it's not a replacement for committing to a group of 3 men for a year and having those 8 men together for a year for 3 hours a night every week, right? And getting to see how you show up in that space, right? But we can't always do that, right? Can't always make that commitment. So they all have benefits. Shall we? Okay. We're turning off the recording to whoever is watching us in the future. Goodbye.